that's kind of cool. Like Jazzy Jeff's like following me, and they accomplished something that I didn't think I would. And he's like, hey, it's J. Cole, just getting too loud and stuff like that. I remember the cops came. It's like one of those songs that I just will never be able to escape.
Can you give us the story behind Waves? Yo, what's up? This is Toru, music producer, entrepreneur, and host of this show, Producer Head. Today's conversation features Freddie Joachim. Freddie is a producer and DJ whose beats have been picked up by artists you may have heard of, including Joey Bada and J. Cole. In this conversation, we trace his journey from its roots in skateboarding and DJing local parties to building the Mellow Orange Collective. Freddie even shares his experience at DJ Jazzy Jeff's playlist Retreat. As you'll hear throughout this conversation, Freddie's enthusiasm for music is deep and his sense of artistic identity is strong. All right, without further ado, here's our conversation with Freddie Joachim. What's up, everybody? This is Toru, and in a way, so are you. Welcome to Producer Head. Today with us, Freddie Joachim. Welcome. How are you?
Hey, thanks. Thanks for having me.
No, man, it's a pleasure. I do want to ask you a little bit about kind of some musical background. And so can you share musical memories that you've had that have influenced kind of your direction?
I mean, I didn't really start getting into like DJing until I was like maybe 15, 16 years old. And that was like maybe around 90, I want to say like 96, 97 or something like that. But prior to that, I was always just like a heavy listener of just like hip hop in general. Just whatever was playing on the radio or whatever was playing on like MTV. And then when I was younger, like say, I don't know, like 11, 12 years old, I was heavily into like skateboarding, and I would purchase or, borrow friends like skate videos. And a lot of those skate videos had a lot of music on it that I've never even like was exposed to. Like a lot of underground hip hop, a lot of just like rock music that I was just not very versed in. So, I have to say like skate videos really kind of helped me, I guess, listen to a lot of like just independent like hip hop in general. And then once I started DJing, like, 15 or whatever, that's when I kind of would, I would just go to the record store and kind of take chances on a lot of records. I mean, maybe a few record stores had listening stations, but then there were a handful that didn't. So you just have to buy the record. And then, like they would just have like records on shelves saying like new release from whoever. And I'd look on the back and I would just say, oh, this is like from the same label as this other group that I like. So maybe it's on a similar vibe. And that's how I took a chance on like a lot of like early independent hip hop. And then I just kind of collected a bunch of records from artists that I just enjoyed listening to, even whether they were like big or even just like really underground kind of artists. And that was kind of like the start of like me really diving heavily into like music. It was when I first started DJing.
What makes you choose DJing as into music?
I didn't want to play any instruments, I grew up playing baseball. And then I remember when, I kind of was a little bit burnt out on it, like especially, teenager, playing it since I was like 5 years old and then going into like high school and everything like that. I think once I got into high school, I was still kind of a little bit into skateboarding. And then you kind of get into like just the arts in general. I feel like at that time, skateboarding was kind of like this counterculture thing. It wasn't like this huge commercial success that it is now. So it was kind of like going against what everybody was into at that time. There weren't too many skateboarders around my neighborhood. And I just got more into the arts just in general, like music, skateboarding, just art in general, photography or whatever it is. And then I remember one year I didn't want to play baseball anymore. And I told my dad, I was like, I'm kind of burnt out on baseball. Like, I don't want to do it anymore. He's like, all right, you can quit playing baseball, but you're going to have to play an instrument. You're going to have to do something. And I just remember being like, I do not want to like learn how to play an instrument or play the piano or anything. So I ended up just continuing playing baseball. And then, since I didn't really want to learn how to play an instrument, I would see DJs on TV, like MTV, just like scratching and kind of doing whatever, mixing or whatever. And I think it was just the equipment that kind of like um, really appealed to me. I mean, my parents had like the stereo at home and like a few like tape reels and stuff like that, some old school stuff. But yeah, I don't know what it was. It was just like something about seeing like turntables and a mixer and how like a DJ kind of manipulated sounds that seemed kind of appealing to me. So I kind of begged my dad for my first DJ setup when I was like 15, and luckily he was pretty supportive about it. And we just went down to this like local like music store, and I just kind of bought a somewhat cheap setup, and then that's kind of how I just started. And I mean, good for me that I kind of stuck with it. I wasn't just like um, I didn't just push it to the side. Like once I started, I actually that was like one of the first things that I actually kind of like sat down and like really tried to immerse myself and trying to learn how to like mix and how to do other things. And like I said, I just went to the record store every day just to buy records, and yeah, it just kind of stuck with me. And I still kind of enjoy it. I still enjoy scratching and everything like that.
It sounds like your dad was a pretty open-minded guy because I'm sure when he said, sports are an instrument, you play, he's probably picturing in your mind if you go the instrument route or the music route, it's going to be piano, guitar, drums, I don't know, something like that. So the fact that he was open to choosing something that's definitely like non-conventional, and I imagine during his life is not something he saw a lot of people doing close up.
Hmm.
So what do you think your dad was trying to instill in you?
I honestly, I don't know. Like, I mean, he never, like, my parents never really like forced me to do anything. I mean, I think baseball was just one of those things where I did enjoy playing it, and I do enjoy like watching it and everything like that. Um, but it was just my dad was heavily into baseball, growing up, and just as a fan and everything like that. So I think he just kind of wanted me to get into it just because it was something that he loved watching and doing. Um, and then it was probably just because he just didn't want me, just laying around the house all day too, just to have a extracurricular activity as like a kid. But yeah, like my parents never really like forced me to play any instruments like that. My dad he knew how to play the trumpet. He grew up playing the trumpet, but he never like forced me to play or anything like that. Um, Growing up in our house, like my dad listened to a lot of classical music. He kind of forced us to listen to classical music in the car, only because he just didn't want to listen to like hip hop on the radio or whatever was playing. It just wasn't his jam. So we kind of were forced to either listen to classical music or maybe some jazz music. But I would have to say he wasn't like heavily into it. Like he wasn't heavily into jazz the way I would say I am now. And I think he just wanted maybe to listen to music that was just a little bit more calming. Maybe because
Mm.
we were like wild kids. So, like he just didn't want us to be listening to something that would just make us even more wild or something like that.
Just how many brothers and sisters do you have?
I have an older sister.
Okay.
Yeah.
How many years apart are you guys?
I think we're about, I want to say like 6 years apart.
Did she
Yeah.
pass any music down to you?
Yeah, for sure. Like she was heavily into like a lot of like social conscious hip hop, like from the 90s, like De La Soul and Tribe Called Quest and Leaders of the New School and like the Far Side she was really into. And I remember going into her room and like stealing, like singles or, CDs or tapes or whatever, and just listening to it. So I was pretty lucky that my sister, she listened to a lot of different types of musics, but yeah, like especially the hip hop, I kind of stole from my sister a little bit.
So do you remember your first DJ gig?
I don't remember my very first one, but I remember since I was in high school when I first started DJing, I remember there weren't many DJs at my high school, like maybe one or two other DJs. Some were a little bit older than me. I think all of them were older than me. But then I was maybe the only DJ in my grade. And like a lot of my friends, they were just like white, like stoners and like like surfers and stuff like that. So I would just DJ their like little parties and stuff like that. And I remember one of my first times DJing one of their parties. You, there's just like a bunch of like 15, 16-year olds just getting drunk at like somebody's like parents' house and stuff like that, just getting too loud and stuff like that. I remember the cops came and, the party was pretty much over and we were just loading up, my equipment, like a friend or something like that. And then one of our friends just gets arrested by the cops because, he's drinking a beer or something like that. But yeah, that was like, these parties weren't too crazy or anything like that. It was just a bunch of high school kids just wanting to get like drunk while their parents are like not home, kind of thing.
Yeah. Do you remember what you were playing?
I think Jay-Z was big then, like Big Pimpin' was big. So I had to like, even though I was buying like a lot of like independent hip hop records, I would still have to buy like party records as well because, like I was basically getting hired to DJ these parties. So of course I would need like party breaks and stuff like that. So a lot of like Jay-Z, some Ja Rule was in there, maybe some, I don't even remember what was big back then, Juvenile. And then so a lot of these parties, a lot of like whatever was a very popular song at that time, they would just want me to play it on repeat. So I'd play like, Jay-Z Big Pimpin' like 10 times, throughout the
That's amazing.
I think I still have a lot of those records too. They're just at my parents'.
Yeah, that's really dope, man. So for the people who choose the kind of odd route of playing instruments into production, what do you think that they potentially can learn from
I'm
DJing?
not sure, honestly. I feel like there is they're kind of maybe two different things. I mean, you can definitely learn how song structures are like laid out for the most part. I mean, I think when you're DJing, you kind of program your sets in a way where like this particular song meshes well with this song, so you kind of create a playlist in a way like have how like a I don't know, I guess a party would be programmed. Um, you can check out like song structures or how I guess how to like move a crowd. Maybe that's one thing you can maybe learn from DJing, especially if you're going to be like somebody who like performs as far as like instruments go. Um, how certain I guess chords or songs impact a crowd a little bit differently than others. I guess that's maybe one way DJing can maybe help, say, like a instrumentalist or whatever.
What inspires you to make the transition, or not necessarily because it's not like you stopped yet, but it's what inspires you to take up production?
Early on when I was DJing, I would just make kind of like mixtapes of breaks and I would just like scratch over those breaks because, like when you buy records, there would be like a drum break that was only like, 5 seconds or something like that. So you would just learn how to record or loop up drum breaks so you can just scratch over them for like, whatever, like 5 minutes or whatever it is. And then, like with DJing, there's already the equipment side of things, like you're already recording your own mixes. You're already kind of somewhat in the studio learning how to like use mixers, audio mixers or whatever it is, microphones, like simple stuff in the studio. And then, since I was kind of like just recording my own kind of mixes and my own just like extended drum breaks, I was also, of course, at the same time, I was also listening to some of my favorite like hip hop instrumentals and stuff like that. And I don't know if it was really like, oh, this is an inspiration for me to get into making my own music or making my own like beats. But, I would listen to jazz records and I'd be like, oh, that's a pretty cool, like, that's a cool, like sample to loop up. So that's what I would do. I would just kind of loop up samples and then take those drum breaks and then just kind of layer those two together. And then that's kind of how I made different styles of like scratch like loops for the most part, like some piano loop and then just put drum break over it and then you would just scratch over that. And then that just kind of slowly progressed into like editing full songs, like editing like a track where it had like an intro, it had like a bridge, and then it had like, I guess, like verses in a way. And then we would scratch that way, and then that would just be like, okay, now we're just making songs now at this point. Like we're making actual beats. So, and I just kind of just stuck with that and just kind of tried different pieces of equipment that I could afford at the time. I was like a young college student, broke college student. Um, and then you would just borrow, or you would just go to friends' houses and use their equipment because they had like a sampler, or you would go maybe like a college production room because they had like like a 4-track that you can like use. Like computers weren't really the main thing that people were making music on at that time. People are still making stuff off like 4-tracks and stuff like that. And then you would just kind of use that stuff, and yeah, you just kind of like snowballed after that. Like just trying different things, and then it wasn't until like maybe a few years into experimenting with creating music where I was like, oh, like let me actually try to like actually put a beat tape together, and just just send it to friends, like we were like stoners at the time too, like in our early 20s, so you would hang out with your friends, play beats, and then try to rap over them too, like you're just we were just kind of like heavily into just like hip hop at that time, like all the elements of hip hop or whatever it was. And then, yeah, and then, like in my early 20s, I was like, oh, let me just try to like put like beat tapes together and just send them off to whoever wants to listen to them or whatever. You just burn them onto like a CD, and then they would just live in your friend's car for a while. And then hopefully, like you can make a connection with like somebody who was kind of like on the same page as you, um, as far as like making music and the style of making music and everything like that. Oh, like you would meet somebody from, I don't know, from a friend of a friend and be like, oh, he actually raps, like you can maybe like put something together. And that's kind of how like early on a lot of like those musical relationships were kind of formed in a way. And then this was kind of like also the start of like social media, like the boom of social media. So like MySpace was going on, and MySpace had like a I guess a music kind of thing for artists. And then that's how I kind of connected with like a lot of like music artists that were kind of doing the same thing as me for the most part.
What did your first beats sound like?
Well, like my very first stuff, I was using like a really old like Casio keyboard, and then just using like general MIDI sounds from like a computer. So I think the Chronic 2001 just came out. So a lot of that stuff it was somewhat like that. I was still just learning how to make stuff. I would have to say like a lot of my first beats were just like original compositions, just playing around on the keyboard and making things sound somewhat decent. And then I didn't get into sampling until like a few years later after that. So yeah, I wouldn't say they were like jazzy. They were definitely more like Dr. Dre style beats. And then once I got into sampling like a few years later, it became like more jazz driven.
How did you, I imagine when you first started, you were kind of like, or how did you feel when you started first making, you would listen back to them?
I don't know. Like in a way, I felt like, oh wow, like I actually made something that I usually don't make. Like I've been a DJ for like X amount of years. It was nothing like, well, this could be on like an album, or like I'm never gonna put this out. But like actually, I think it felt more like, oh, I accomplished something that I didn't think I would. I was so used to thinking that like making songs required a lot of just like studio time, like actually being in a studio and like recording with like an engineer and doing all this other stuff. And then once like computers kind of came around, I was like, oh wow, you can kind of like do all this stuff like at home. And that's kind of what I felt like when I made those early things. And at the same time, I was like in college too, and I was taking like some recording classes, so they kind of went hand in hand to like help me understand how things worked in a way, like how to sequence and all this other stuff. So there was like kind of like the technical side of how to make music, and then now there was like this creative side that was kind of like brewing inside me, I guess, at the same time.
What do you mean when you say sequence?
Like how to kind of lay everything out on a computer for the most part. Like, I mean, of course, there's different types of sequencer hardware and software sequencers, but like what we were learning at school was how to, we would just have like this MIDI sequencing course where you would learn how to kind of program drums and know how to like edit MIDI notes on the computer and how to kind of arrange that and how to like punch in and punch out and stuff like that. So that's kind of how we learned how to sequence a lot of like computer kind of generated music. It was still fairly new, but I mean, that's kind of that was kind of like the 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 backbone of how I learned how to do stuff on the computer, like on my own.
Yeah, so it sounds like when you made that, you're making your early music, and you're aware, like you don't think it's going to be the next Chronic 2001, but also it sounds like it really was. It gave you a lot of energy. You were less critical and more like encouraged by, oh, I made this. I can make more music.
Yeah, and also it was fun, like it was just like a fun thing. It wasn't like I don't think it was like daunting at all, like it was just it's almost like playing a video game, I guess, like it's like this new fun technology that I'm just kind of learning. So, yeah, like I didn't know what I wanted to do like when I was like 19 or 20, I was just kind of like working and just hanging out with friends, so and then, like that downtime that I did have, I was still like DJing, so I I feel like, when you're just a DJ, um you can only like mix for so long at home, like just practice mixing or just practice scratching. So here was this kind of new thing to kind of put into the equation that I enjoyed doing, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, so I'm curious, like, so you start out. I'm kind of like this relationship between DJing and production. I kind of want to understand maybe like the evolution of it, of their like percentages of how much time they occupy in your life. So you start out and it's 100% DJing, production doesn't exist, and then it seems like from the outside out, obviously, is part of why I'm asking, but like that it goes eventually to a point where you're 100%. So I'm curious about whether or not that's true, but also like kind of over, like this phase that we're talking about with your friends when they've got your mixtapes, and how much of your time is DJing versus producing, and how does that shift?
Yeah, I would have to say like in my early creative career, I guess, um, it was about like more DJing than it was production. Like I wasn't trying to be like a producer. I was just making music. And then, like I would still go out and DJ, like, whether it's like some dive bar or, whatever, some auto show or something like that. And also a lot of my friends, they were DJs, they weren't even trying to like make beats as well. So like a lot of that influence was still like heavily DJing and stuff like that. And I was really trying to be like a good battle DJ at the time too. So I would enter like a few DJ battles here and there, scratch battles. And then I think since I found myself not as good as those DJs that were winning a lot of those battles, that's when I shifted a little bit my mindset to production. And then that's kind of like how it wasn't like an overnight thing where I was like DJing and let me just focus on production kind of thing. It was just more like, oh, let me just kind of like learn more about production and how to make music and everything like that. Or, doing more research on like equipment that I could benefit from. And then, like as time went on, like we're talking about like years, then it kind of shifted more into producing music. So like when I first started, I would have to say, or, like when I was still heavily into DJing, I would have to say it was like about 80% DJing, 20% production. Whereas like now, and maybe even 10 to 15 years previous to now, it's like almost like 90% production for the most part. And then DJing now, I would have to say is more of just more of a personal thing for me. You know what I'm saying? Like I'll still DJ if somebody asks me to spin out or whatever, but it's not like it's definitely not my main focus, like I definitely don't just practice at home all the time, you know? Yeah. So I think it was I think it was when I started making all those connections with different artists, and once I started getting my production on like albums and pressing vinyl and everything, and kind of um, working with like different companies for like licensing and everything, then that's why it kind of became more production focused. And it's not that I don't like DJing at all. Like, it was just, like production kind of became more of my livelihood. And then this was also like the start of like the whole beat scene, like especially like in LA and stuff like that. And then, or even overseas. And then I would have to kind of somewhat be a performer in a way. It's weird, like going out as a producer and then performing your beats is kind of like a weird thing. It was kind of like this unheard of thing, like in the 90s and the early 2000s and stuff like that. So I would have to kind of, whenever I did shows here and overseas, it was like a combination of both. So like I would I would have to do like a beat set and then I would have to DJ as well. So like it was, I don't know. I think it was just the promoters just needing to get more bang for the buck kind of thing. But like I enjoyed it because it was both things I was fairly decent at. I feel like producers nowadays are getting more into like DJing. Even like like rappers that have kind of stopped rapping, they're getting more into DJing as well. It's a weird thing. I don't know. Like, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, so yeah, one thing I wanted to ask is like, it's really funny you say that. So I was thinking, just like DJing versus production, like DJing kind of has inherently like this performance, this like public facing aspect to it, and the production is like can be very private. It's basically as private as you want it to be. And so I was just wondering also like to what extent maybe you're just in starting out DJing. I'm assuming in the same way that people pick up instruments, there's a desire to play shows in front of people in some way, and then to get interested in production to pull you in a completely different direction. And so those things serve like kind of different, I don't know, parts of yourself maybe in some way.
Yeah, I like when I DJ, I feel like for the most part, I'm playing other people's music. It's never really my own, so it's never awkward for me, for the most part. But then, like what I was saying when I was doing like beat sets and kind of like programming, like my beats for kind of like a more performance kind of side of things, it for me it was more. It was like this. I feel like it still is, but like this weird kind of thing because this is just something I made in the studio, or like my bedroom or whatever. And now I'm trying to like perform it, even though I'm not like a musician and I'm not like a performer in general. Like how do I take this kind of like produced song and then make it kind of fit in a more live setting, like a live performance setting? And I had to find a way to kind of navigate that as far as like how I would actually be able to present this in kind of like a performance setting and with software and kind of just knowing how things work on the technical side of things. You kind of find different ways to kind of make it like more interesting for people that are just kind of like at a show watching you kind of perform beats live. It's kind of like a weird thing because if you're just on there and you just push a play button and you're just standing there just kind of vibing out to your own beat, it's kind of it's like this weird thing. So like I had to learn how to kind of make it a little bit more interesting as far as how I would play my beats out live. So I would have to kind of like learn or know how to finger drum over tracks or like how to play the keys over like certain parts of a song and whatnot. And that's kind of like how I guess I guess programmed my live kind of performances.
Cool. So could you get into a little bit like that difference? So like your DJing, is that typically on vinyl? Is it typically a digital DJ set?
I mean, it's typically now just using Serato, so like digital vinyl. But I mean, I grew up spinning just regular records and whatnot. I mean, I still do every once in a while, but I just find it just a little bit easier to to just use Serato for the most part.
And then when you switch over to that beat set, what does your setup then look like?
So I used for a lot of my beat sets, I used kind of like a drum pad for the most part. And early on, I would use that to kind of trigger kind of sets in Ableton Live. So I would have like everything kind of, I guess, laid out in session mode in Ableton Live. And it was different because for the most part, when I use Ableton Live, it's usually in arrangement mode, and then I had to kind of learn how to use session mode to do like live performances. So a lot of that is just like it's DJing in a sense, just without like spinning records for the most part. So I had a lot of like these kind of pre-edited tracks of mine, pre-edited songs of mine, kind of in session mode, but they would be kind of like missing elements of those songs. So like the drums wouldn't be in certain parts of those songs. So I could use like a drum rack and just basically play over that song. Just it just doesn't have drums in like say the first 16 bars or whatever. And then a lot of the other stuff were just like effects that you can kind of trigger. So it's like it's kind of similar to how people use the SP404, like with like the kind of glitching and stuff like that. But it was just kind of more in a computer setting for the most part. And then I would use like maybe an iPad just to kind of trigger like tracks or whatever it is. But yeah, it was just like DJing, just without like a typical kind of DJ controller.
Right. And then what kind of MIDI controllers are you using for other sample triggering and drums?
When I first started doing live beat sets, a lot of it was I had a machine MK2, and what was cool about that at the time was you can use it as a controller with Ableton Live. So you can actually trigger clips on that, and it would kind of like show up on the actual controller. And you can trigger like, I guess, effects and stuff like that. And then after that, I got like the Ableton Push 2. So I kind of like took that around a little bit. But then like when I do overseas stuff or when I travel, I try to keep my equipment pretty minimal. So I'll just have like a small, like little pad, like a 16 pad controller. I think the last one I used was like a Machine Micro. I think it was a MK2 or I forgot. And then just like an iPad. And the iPad I had, I ran an app called Touchable. And Touchable, you can kind of sync with Ableton. It kind of just basically shows you all the clips in Ableton. And then that's how I was able to kind of trigger clips through the iPad and then just use the Machine Micros just kind of like to play drums for the most part, or just finger drums.
Gotcha. Yeah. I don't know if you know Mark the Clive Lowe. I think he talks about using that same app on iPad. It's so I guess like by doing that, you can kind of take the computer out of the equation. You don't really need to look at it once you can see everything you need to see in terms of clips, and then you have everything more tactile and sample triggering and drums and stuff.
Yeah, for the most part. I mean, I think I just used the computer just to kind of just make sure the levels and everything were okay for the most part.
I don't know, man. As you look back, we've kind of covered some of like the earlier like chapters of your career. And I guess like as you look back, like how do you in hindsight like label those, and what do you think was the attitude that was kind of guiding you during each of them?
I would have to say maybe like the early part of my career, like say like during like MySpace when I was able to like make connections with other artists. That was kind of, I would have to say that's kind of like the start of my production career officially, because I was able to link with different labels here as well as like overseas and actually get my music pressed on like vinyl and actually make money from making music.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, prior to that, I was just kind of just making connections and really just giving my beats to anybody that I could get to either rap on it or, just kind of feature it or whatnot. But then yeah, that was kind of like I would say like the driving force on that was just to get my name out there. You know, like I was young. I was like in my early 20s. I was just trying to get like my name to be kind of like passed around, you know, for the most part. Um, and then, you know, I would have to say like the mid part of that production career was probably like the Joey stuff, you know. That was kind of like that's when like my name kind of came up a lot. Because everybody kind of was following Joey and then they liked that song and then I mean that was just kind of like the limited commercial success that I've had in my career. And then after that, I feel like that was kind of like I wouldn't say like the peak of my career, but like that's when like more companies were kind of stepping to me to do like, you know, like licensing and just making more connections with like bigger like industry people, I guess. And then yeah, and just doing like more shows and stuff like that for the most part. And then, you know, just fast forward till now, it's just like it's just all downhill now. Just like dwindling now. It's like a slow plane crash. No, I feel like now it's more of just like like a personal career kind of thing, like a personal kind of creative career now, where it's like I'm not really so stressed about like working with people or like working with companies or anything like that. It's just more about like let me see what I can do on my own without like the need for too many like hands in the pot kind of thing. Because you know, like I've been working with labels and companies for so long that I feel like I'm at a point where now where I'm just like, let me just kind of do things the way I want to do it and not split it with anybody kind of thing. And like make my own creative decisions on, you know, whether it's just like artwork or like just the direction of how I want things to sound and everything. So that's kind of like where I am now. It's just like an older kind of producer that's just trying to stay afloat. No, I'm just joking. But you know what, you understand what I mean. It's a young person's game. Like I feel like the music industry is just a young person's game, not because old people can't like be a part of it anymore. It's just more because I feel like when you're young, you're just like hungry and like you're like way more motivated to like make connections and you're even some young people that are in like this desperate state of like they'll do anything to just like to get their track on like a compilation or you know just on somebody's radar. And I feel like I'm just a little bit past that for the most part. And yeah, it's just more of just like a personal journey for me now. um just trying to just be better or just learn more new things and stuff like that.
Yeah. So when you look back and looking forward at the same time and like where you're going, like are you somebody who like is setting goals? Did you set goals back then, you know? And are you setting them now? Or have you and like operated in kind of that structural kind of like conscious way? Or has it been more like I just like doing this, I'm gonna keep doing this, try to meet people and see what happens, and kind of just operating more based on the kind of intuition and feel?
Yeah, like I don't think I set too many goals for myself early on in my career. I think when I was trying to release my first album, like maybe I set a goal to like actually get it with a label to release. And I sent my I guess my demo out to a handful of labels and none of them really were interested in it. So I was lucky enough to like link with like an overseas label that kind of released my first album. But then like after that, it was just more about just I don't think I really set too many goals for myself. It was more of just like you know just I think my whole mindset was just producing music, and I was just kind of like in the studio for the most part every day, just making something new. And then a lot of the early stuff that I released was just free. They were just like digital beat tapes in a way. And I would just kind of release them free, like either through my website or through like Bandcamp or something like that. And then this is like way before like streaming was a thing. Yeah, even now, I just set like small obtainable goals for myself. You know, like, oh, you know, you need to get this done like today, or you need to get like, you need to work on this or whatever it is. Yeah, I haven't been too like structured for the most part, as far as like the stuff that I release.
And I have to ask you about Mellow Orange, I feel like, while we're on here, because you haven't included that explicitly, like as part of like your trajectory. I feel like I assume that's what you're kind of referring to when you're talking about pressing vinyl and stuff and getting into some of that. But
Well, the early stuff was done through like a few Japanese labels in my early in my career. Mellow Orange started, I want to say it started like in 2007 or 8, like that.
can you give a quick little like kind of background just in case people listening
Yeah.
aren't
So
familiar?
yeah, Mellow Orange was actually I guess founded by a good friend of mine from the Bay, my friend Yusai, we and then we were just like friends, DJ friends at that time. And then I would just kind of go up to the Bay just to hang out with him and maybe do a couple shows. And then he decided to maybe like start like a label just to release like a compilation. And we got a few of our friends that were just like mutual friends who were like music artists, and we kind of like compiled like this compilation. And he kind of just needed help with like mixing and some of the mastering, and he wanted me to kind of do some of the production on it as well. So that kind of just was like the start of Mellow Orange, and then we just kind of just kept going, just releasing other people's music. Me especially. I think I was kind of like the face of that label at the time, and it was also because I didn't really want to work with or try to like I didn't really want to keep going down the route of just sending my projects to other labels as well, just to, just at the end, just to get a no or whatever it was, or just to get rejected. So me and Yusai just decided just to release most of my stuff through Mellow Orange, and then that we just got other like DJs and artists just involved, and we were just kind of reaching out to like young producers and stuff like that. We were like a label that we didn't want to like pigeonhole anybody to our label. We kind of wanted to use our label as more of like a jumping off point for like, especially for younger artists. We wanted to like just kind of expose their music to everybody, and then they can pretty much do whatever they wanted to do after that for the most part. So that's kind of how we kind of operated. We just kind of like found young, somewhat not known artists or producers or whatever it was, and then we just kind of released their music, and then they could pretty much do whatever they want to after that. If they wanted to release more music with us, then they could. Of course we would. And then as time went on, like more labels came out, and like the music scene just got completely oversaturated. And of course we got older, we started having families, and we started getting married. So it was just like too much for all of us to just kind of like keep doing it. I mean, it's still kind of around, but we haven't released something in like years, But yeah, it was just it just kind of like fizzled out because we were just too busy in our personal lives for the most part.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, it's cool, man. I mean, I enjoyed following that back when it was going on. So I guess we got to talk. Like you mentioned the Joey thing. I mean, it is an iconic beat, and I mean, I think Joey is, I mean, I'm not alone in this, incredibly talented rapper. So can you give us the story behind Waves?
So I produced Waves maybe I want to say a year before Joey even got his hands on it or even listened to it. I mean, for the most part, SoundCloud was kind of like the predominant website that you would kind of like just put your music on. And that's kind of where I was just putting music up for people to listen to. And from my understanding, Joey was just on the internet just searching for beats to rap over, and he came across mine. And then this was like the very start of Joey's career, when he was still like kind of in high school, about to graduate. And then I guess he was making noise out in New York. And then a friend of mine, Lauren, who she's originally from like LA, she moved out to New York like like a year or two prior to that, and then she was like, "Dude, I didn't know you're working with this kid named Joey Badass." And I was like, "What? What's happening?" like, and she was like, "You have to listen to him because he's like he's kind of making a name for himself here in Brooklyn." And I was like, "Okay." And then that's when like he kind of signed with his management at the time, which I think was Pro Era. And then like his management would hit me up and tell me that they're going to be releasing like his 1999 mixtape and then whatnot. And then yeah, he just kind of like that was kind of like his debut song, Waves, for the most part. He performed it pretty much everywhere, performed it on TV and whatnot. And then everybody kind of started knowing Joey. And then I actually worked on I think 2 or 3 songs off his sophomore album, or I guess his first official album. And then
Oh wow, I didn't realize that. That's
yeah,
awesome. Yeah.
and then yeah, I was just kind of like in touch with his management at the time for that duration, and then he just kind of did his own thing after that. For the most part, he worked with other bigger producers after that.
Hey, real quick, if you're enjoying this episode, take a second and hit that subscribe button. Remember, Producer Head grows thanks to listeners and supporters like you. So if something here resonates, take a second to let us know by following, liking, subscribing. Your support means everything. By subscribing and sharing, you help us grow the Producer Head community, which allows us to continue bringing you incredible conversations just like this one, and opens the door to even more exciting guests in the future. Let's keep building this together. All right, back to the episode. Dude, yeah, what was it like when you heard what he did over it that first time?
I don't know, like I think it was. I don't think it was like hard, but it was like here's this like 16-year-old kid, like rapping over. It's like what's so different from him, like than any other like young kid rapping over like a beat of mine for the most part. But I think since he maybe had a vision of what was going on and, like the people he surrounded himself with as far as like management and everything like that, I think that really helped his career out. And then he completely matured as like a rapper for the most part to this day. I mean, you can kind of hear it in a lot of his catalog, like going from that early stuff until now, how much he's matured over the years and how much he's kind of really became like a better rapper for the most part. I mean, of course that comes with age and experience, but like, like there's a lot of young kids who want to be rappers and they're just not that great over time. They kind of get caught up in the success of the industry and, making money. And that's kind of like where their content kind of stems from. And it's kind of, it's boring for the most part. Do you really want to hear about some kid, some somewhat well-off kid rapping about like, like money and stuff like that? Of course you don't, So, I mean, yeah, that's cool that kind of Joey became like even a better rapper than he, like started off to be.
Yeah, man. I mean, and really, I think expanded. Like, have you heard or seen that video of him doing Umi Says with like a live band?
I think I have actually.
Yeah, it's in terms of like, you talk about Waves and seeing that video. I mean, he's literally, I think scenes of that video, they're like walking through like a high school. I don't know if it's his actual school or not, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And yeah, I mean, to your point, I just think he really is somebody from the outside, I don't know, but it really seems like somebody who really took writing very seriously.
Yeah, I think he read a lot of books, like in the process of him trying to be a better rapper for the most part. I mean, I don't know exactly who took him under his wing. You hear about these stories about like young rappers and like say like a bigger rapper, kind of takes them somewhat under their wing. I just don't know if that happened with Joey, but I mean, I feel like he made a lot of like the right decisions as far as like an artist, a young artist anyway, would make. I mean, you hear about stories about like J. Cole like trying to, get with Jay-Z to have Jay-Z take him under his wing and stuff like that. And then they kind of, I don't, they're probably cool now, but I mean, like, there was probably a point where J. Cole decided he needed to do his own thing and go his own way. Same probably with like Kendrick Lamar, like what Dr. Dre kind of taking him under his wing a little bit, and then he kind of like did his own thing as well.
So, I mean, speaking of J. Cole, man, I mean, he also uses the same beat. Can you give us a little bit of that story also?
Yeah, so like I get like this random email from some random Gmail account and he's like, "Hey, it's J. Cole." Like, "Hey, it's J. Cole. Like I really like the Waves beat. We want to use it or whatnot." And I'm like, "Yeah, right. Like, here's this random Gmail account. Like, I'm not gonna respond to it. I already think it's spam. Like, it's like BS." So a little bit of time goes by, maybe like a week or two, and he's like, "Hey, it's J. Cole." Like another email, and it's like, "Okay, like this is BS again. Like this isn't J. Cole." And I'm like, I he's like, he gives me kind of a breakdown of what's going on through the email, and he's like, "Do you have time to like talk or whatever?" And like on the phone, and I'm like, I respond back, and I'm like, "You have to understand like my hesitation about this, or like I think this is fake for the most part." And he's like, "It's not fake. This is my Gmail. I'm gonna give you a call. Like I have a basketball game. I'm gonna give you a call after." And I was like, "Okay, sure." And then like I get this call from like, I don't even know, it's like a New York number or something like that. It's probably still in my phone. Um, but yeah, it's Cole, it's J. Cole. He's telling me like what he wants to do for the thing and whatnot. I'm just telling him, like it's, Joey uses track, like he uses beats. So like, I think you would have to kind of reach out to his management, like trying to get everything situated. But like, I had this like hour-long conversation with J. Cole on the phone, and then I think I sent him like the stems to the track, or like a mix or something like that. And then maybe 2 months or 3 months down the line, HBO like puts out this documentary for J. Cole or whatever it was, and then like one of the tracks was the Waves track, or the False Prophets. He shoots a video for it and everything, and I'm just like, wow, like that was not a BS call or email. But yeah, that was definitely a cool like little experience in my music career, I guess. I mean, I wonder if I called the number now, if J. Cole would answer it, but
let's call it right now online. So what was it? What did you guys talk about for an hour, man?
Well, he was just telling me like how he was just, he was just going through like just random beats like on like SoundCloud and YouTube and stuff, and he liked the track that Joey did and stuff like that, and he really wanted to like use Waves for like this upcoming like kind of project and everything like that. It wasn't very too specific, but like, he was just kind of like bigging me up, and I was just kind of like, I don't even think I was listening, like it was just it was just noise. It was just,
yeah,
you know what I'm saying? So I don't really remember the full details of the phone conversation. It was definitely like it was a little bit shocking in a way.
I gotta ask, so like can you talk about making that beat? Like when you look back, like do you remember the session when you made it?
I think I still have the session for the most part. I mean, it's one of those songs that I can't really escape. But yeah, honestly, it was probably just one of those tracks that I just kind of like put together. It wasn't like anything like overly thought out. I was just, making music like how I normally do. And then I just probably put it out on SoundCloud for just everybody to listen to. It was just kind of like one of those things. And then it just kind of like got into the right ears for the most part. And then it just kind of blew up from there. And then it's just like, yeah, it's like one of those songs that I just will never be able to escape. It's going to be on my headstone, just like the producer of Waves and some other songs.
Is there some frustration to that?
No, it's not. I'm just joking around about it. It's just how like a lot of like people who never listen to me ever, they know who I am. My dad tells me every once in a while, he would tell me the story, like where he was just out, like I think he was in like the Midwest or somewhere like that, and he was just like talking to like somebody either like on the plane or something like that, and it was like this. He said he sat next to this like rapper or whatever, and he's like, "Oh, like my son, he makes music as well," and like the guy was telling him like, "Oh, is there anything like I've heard of?" And he's like, Yeah, he worked with this rapper called J. Cole, and he's like, "What, really?" And he's like, "Yeah, he made this song called False Prophet." So like my dad would say like he would that's how he would like tell other people like like what I did for a living, you know. Oh, he made this track called Waves, and he made this song called False Prophets, and then like a good amount of people would be like, yeah, yeah, I know that track. Like your son made that, you know. But yeah, like I'm saying, like it was good for people that never followed my music production since they already knew the Waves song. They'd be like, oh, you know, like I really like that track. Let me listen to some other songs that Freddie's produced, and maybe like I'll get like new listeners or whatever it is.
How do you think about success, man? I mean, I think you've had it's a really, I mean, how often does that happen? Two for one, you know, either one of those songs. I mean, really are just they're both great.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I wasn't too like I wasn't too. I was just in a way I was just kind of just riding the wave of those.
No
Um,
pun intended.
yeah, no pun intended. Like I was like I already knew not to like really look too deep into it. Like this is going to open up so many other doors, kind of thing. Like I know how sometimes like any kind of creative industry is like kind of fickle. You know what I'm saying? So like I wasn't too like, oh, I'm going to start working with like I'm going to start working with Kanye or anything like it was never like that. I would just kind of, yeah, like I said, I was just kind of riding the wave of the success of those two songs or just that beat in general. And I think it did really well. And I was happy with the results. I mean, I'm pretty sure there's producers that have given songs to big artists and they're somewhat terrible songs, but they have like huge success. Maybe they can look at those songs and be like, wow, I just don't really like that song, but it's paid for this kind of house, kind of thing. Yeah. Would you define that as success? I guess maybe in some aspect, even though you're not completely in love with the song. But lucky for me, like both of those songs came out really well, and I'm really happy with one the artists who actually picked up those songs. It could have been anybody, like any kind of rapper, but at least it was two like real lyricists for the most part, two really good talented rappers that picked up that song. Like I was saying, like that was just kind of like my limited commercial success. Like I feel like at that point I was already kind of succeeding as far as like small goals for myself. Like my I like I was saying, I made these like really obtainable goals to just get my stuff on vinyl and just to kind of like put out a project that I was like happy with, and like my I feel like my other albums that were coming out around that same time were like just albums that I was just happy with. So I already kind of like defined that as successful, what I'm saying? And like being able to take that money that I made from whatever and then just kind of put that into building a studio that I really was kind of like the studio of my dreams in a way. That I feel like that's a big accomplishment as well, like, there's a lot of like young producers that really they're just making stuff on like a laptop in their bedroom and, having the ability to have like my own space and everything. That was kind of like a huge deal for me.
Yeah, man. I mean, I think you have a lot to be proud of. Congratulations. When you describe some of those other goals, outside of the more commercial success, they really all what I notice they all have in common is that they really are things that are within your control. Releasing something on vinyl, making something that you're happy with. Is that a really conscious thing?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, of course, nowadays you can do any of that stuff for the most part. I mean, as long as you save enough money, you can press whatever you want on vinyl. There's a bunch of like vinyl manufacturers available. But I feel like as like a younger producer, like I just didn't have the funds or the opportunity to release stuff on my own. So I didn't really have those opportunities unless like a label was really keen to release something with me. I don't know. Like I feel like a lot of artists, they have the resources now that are readily available nowadays. Whereas like like 10, 15 years ago, it wasn't, it was available. It just wasn't as obtainable as it was now.
Yeah, I hear that. And I think even still, I think the thing that's interesting is that you're talking about putting out the record versus like how the record quote unquote performs, and maybe in terms of sales or listens. And I think that's a pretty that seems to be a really intentional thing. And I'm wondering, like, did you learn that somewhere? Is that something that you just kind of implicitly understood?
Yeah, like I was never, even to this day, I was never really focused on the numbers as far as like streams or as far as like sales or anything. I would think I was just more about like, I kind of treated almost all my albums as kind of just like personal projects, you know? And as long as I got it out and as long as there was a good amount of people that were willing to listen to it, I was happy with that result for the most part. Um, I feel like a lot of like younger younger artists and whatever it is, they're so focused on like how many hits their song gets, or even like an Instagram post, they need to get, X amount of like clicks, or even on their YouTube. And it's just like, I've never really been focused on that. Yeah, it was just more about just like putting out something that one, I was just happy with, and two, that people maybe can connect with in some capacity. I don't know.
Do you feel like that's something that like you're just so focused on what it is that you're doing that those other things don't come up, or do you like feel those things come up and you kind of just ignore them or push them aside?
I mean, they do come up. I don't think I completely ignore them. Like, say, if I'm making a song, like, say, if I'm making like a single or something like that, I kind of want to put out something that I feel like the majority of my listeners will enjoy. And that would probably get more hits, like on just like a single. But I don't take it too seriously, like I don't take it like to the point where like, oh, this is never gonna like, nobody's gonna listen to this, or nobody's gonna purchase this, or whatever it is. I think it's more about just like, I put a lot of faith in my listeners in general. I feel like if they're listening to me, then I'm pretty sure they have somewhat decent taste in music. So like whatever I kind of like put out, I feel like they're just going to enjoy in general. So
Yeah, it sounds like there's a strong sense of confidence now in what you do.
yeah, I think that it comes part with like being overly critical of myself as well. I'm not just going to put out just like some cheesy, cheesy track that I just made overnight. Like I think there's a little bit more care and time involved when I do release stuff now. That's why I haven't really released stuff in a while, because I feel like sometimes I'm a little bit overcritical about like how this should sound, or if like this should even like be on this project or whatever it is.
Can you talk a little bit how maybe comparison comes into play? I'd imagine that maybe even different ideas or things can creep in.
Like when I make music now, I do sometimes listen to tracks that I've made like, 5, 10 years ago, just to see like where I was creatively at that time and how I kind of approached or even programmed songs, like how I do it now. And there are like comparisons where I'm like, oh, this is like, how come I don't make beats like this anymore? Like, how come I don't use this way of working anymore? And then that kind of like makes something in my brain kind of like go off and be like, oh, you need to like try to like revisit this kind of style again. Because, just looking back on like a particular track, I can be like, oh, like I remember how I did this, like I remember how everything was kind of arranged or whatever it is. And maybe I should start doing that again. Like once I got older, I kind of got a little bit too comfortable as far as the way I started, or the way I am making music now, where it's just kind of like, it's more of just like a formula that I kind of stick with. And then I should really kind of like just throw away that formula again, and just kind of like took all the stuff that I've learned in the past and kind of just create something a little bit different from what I've been doing. And I feel like sometimes that when you do have that formula, you do get bored of making music, because everything is so kind of like ABC, kind of like straight lined. It's good to kind of like get out of that and try not necessarily something even new, but just something that you kind of forgot how to, or you don't really apply that same formula in what you do now, you know?
Yeah, so it's sort of in terms of just kind of maybe evolving a little bit as an artist in terms of just changing your process intentionally.
Yeah, for the most part, I mean, just keeping things a little bit more exciting as far as like making music and just like learning new things too. Even if it's a little bit difficult sometimes to learn, like even for me, like learning how to play certain things on the keys, I'll I'll literally just try to sit down and like have like a 30-minute hour session of just trying to learn chord progression, even though it's like really difficult for me. But I feel like I can benefit from actually taking a little bit more time to like sitting down and like learning something new.
Let's talk about a little bit about the gear because it's you just mentioned chord progressions and it's like to some extent I've noticed that it looks like you've tried to incorporate real instruments, which is, given where we started, kind of surprising because it's something that didn't interest you at all when you were younger.
I mean, people change, like it's artists change. Yeah, it's just like one of those things too, like a part of it is like getting new gear and like kind of building up a studio. That is like a small percentage of it. But then also like, you can't just be using the same plugin that you've been using for like the past like 10 years because it gets a little boring, like you have to kind of try to do new things. And also, like for me, I wanted to incorporate more like kind of like an organic feel to some of my tracks, like I just didn't want it to be like me trying to find a guitar sample and then chopping it up to make it sound like somebody playing the guitar. I might as well just try to play the guitar myself and like kind of come up with something, And it's like it's a learning kind of process too, like a learning and discovering kind of process. So you kind of learn how to play certain tabs or chords on the guitar and then like you kind of incorporate that into something that you're working on or might be working on.
Because I mean, I guess before you try to really record any instruments like that outside of the box, because so much of sampling and everything else is kind of inside. Did you learn anything that surprised you?
I think it all just started with learning something new using the keys for the most part. I mean, I was already kind of, excuse me, I was already kind of making like just bass lines using like a keyboard. And I was like, oh, like why can't I just like come up with like other, you know, melodic elements or like a harmony or something like that with other instruments using the keys. So that's just kind of like where it started. And then just like learning like really simple chord progression to just kind of accent something I was already sampling. And then it kind of just spilled into like, oh, like let me learn how to play the bass a little bit now that I've been playing the bass like on a keyboard for so long. Let me actually see how it is to play the bass, like the actual instrument. And it wasn't really like learning how to play full on like bass lines. It was more about just like playing certain notes that would accent what I was playing on the keys, like the bass on the keys already, just to get it more of like an organic feel, like a more like not just stiff kind of feel, for the most part.
I guess what's the gear that like maybe you're so comfortable with that you think maybe needs to get thrown out or put aside for a little while to move you forward in your creative process?
I don't know. I would say like throw out the computer, but like I'm so like it's like a necessity now for the most part. I feel like the best tracks are the ones that I've been most proud or happiest about were made on the computer, like solely just using the computer for the most part. I mean, I do like making stuff on like MPCs and like other drum machines, but it just doesn't swing right for me. Like yes, I can make like a good decent loop on it, but then I need like to use a computer to like kind of manipulate things sonically so I can like have that certain sound or whatever it is. But if I were to, I don't know, were to like get rid of something that's maybe, I would say I can probably live without the MPC, even though I wouldn't want to, but for the most part, but that's like one of my favorite like samplers of all time.
Which one do you have?
I have them all. Well, I mean, except for like the 60 and the 3000, but I mainly use the MPC X right now.
What gear, I guess, gives you like kind of the most joy or like the most fun when you're making music?
Right now, I would probably say I really like using the Ableton Move because it's so portable. I can just go in the living room and just kind of like sketch out something. It's a good sketch pad, I think. Of course, I'm not going to make a full on song on that, even though you probably could. But I enjoy that one a lot. I really like using the MPC X or like the MPC Touch or whatever it is, MPC One. But it is pretty much like a computer in like a sampler form, Like I feel like now it doesn't really have too many limitations, whereas like the older MPCs really did.
I haven't played with the Move. I'm really curious about it though.
Well, I was kind of thinking about replacing my Ableton Push 2, and I was looking at the 3, but there were like a few nitpicky things that I kind of didn't like about the 3, so I was like, well, I kind of do want a standalone, so I ended up getting the Move. And yeah, like I was saying, it's a pretty good like sketchpad. And I think there's like some new updates for it that I haven't downloaded, but that make it a little bit easier to chop samples and stuff like that.
I got to play with a friend. I have the Push 2 also. The 3, the pads are so noticeably like for like finger drumming and like playing. They're just so much more responsive. But the standalone thing isn't that important to me. So it doesn't really feel, because of that, it doesn't feel like worthwhile for me to upgrade yet.
Yeah, yeah.
I want to ask you, man, because you mentioned this kind of at the top when we are talking about the listening stuff, the playlist retreat. And I think in the community, it's just such a coveted and cool experience from the outside. And so can you talk about your experience there a little bit?
Jazzy Jeff was already kind of following me on Instagram. And, he would kind of like comment on a few of like my posts or like production videos or even me just scratching or something like that. And then I'd be like, oh, that's kind of cool. Like Jazzy Jeff's like following me, like this like legendary DJ and producer and stuff. And then I didn't really think about it too much. Just like the J. Cole thing. Just didn't think about it. It's fake. Just, but he hits me up on Instagram like a few months or later part of last year. And he's like, let me know your email because I want to invite you to something. And I was like, there can only be one thing, like he's going to invite me to. And it's already like playlist in my head. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to get invited to playlist. This is going to be cool. So like a few weeks go by and I get the invite to playlist. And playlist took like a 5-year hiatus for the most part. So this is like the first playlist back since that 5-year hiatus. Yeah, so I basically sign up and I fly out to Jeff's place. And there's like 100 artists, DJs and music producers and singers and keyboard players, bass players, drum players, everybody for the most part. Like a good amount of the artists I already knew, and a good amount of the artists I already knew just by name. I didn't know them by face or anything like that. So it was really cool to just kind of connect with like all these artists that I just kind of were just listening to and not really knowing what they look like. And then, like we would like actually come up to each other and they would introduce, we would introduce each other and then be like, dude, like I've been listening to you for like so long. And they'd say the exact same thing about me. And it's just like, this is crazy, like finally being able to meet like, not just like the artists that you're just kind of listening to, like that were kind of like in the same boat as you as far as like creatively and career wise, but like also being able to meet like legendary artists there, like really huge kind of artists. So like I met a lot of my like just my production heroes at Playlist. So DJ Khalil was there. He was like a huge influence on me. Jake One was there. He was like, he's like another hero of mine. And like a handful of like other just like huge DJs and stuff like that. Of course, like I was one of the new people to Playlist. Yeah, I mean, some of these artists, they've been to Playlist like previously, like a few years, like 2 or 3 years, maybe some of them even 5 years in a row. Yeah, it was definitely cool, like just being able to connect with it. And it wasn't just like, oh, cool, we're just gonna hang out and do stuff. It was like almost like a hard summer camp for artists. It was like a boot camp for artists in a way. So like Jeff for Playlist, he has this huge property. and he has like he basically rents out like I don't even know how many like camper trailers, like with like beds in them and everything like that. So we we were like stuck in like these really narrow kind of beds in like a camper trailer, and then like you wake up in the morning and then you would have like almost like a discussion panel with like just like with different I guess hosts or different things being talked about. Sometimes it's just like sometimes it's like a legendary artist talking about like like certain things as far as the music industry goes. We had like discussions about like AI in music, the music industry, and we had some discussions about like mental health, and we had some discussions like about like some company just releasing like a new software plugin, like different things for the most part. It was definitely like I don't know, like for me, like I'm a pretty reserved guy. Like I'm pretty quiet for the most part when I'm surrounded by like a lot of people, especially like the people at Playlist. But then like the other half of those attendees at Playlist were like extroverts, so they're just talking all the time. Like just really high energy kind of people. So I just don't know where like I would fit in for the most part because like these are like performers and musicians and like they're just playing nonstop. Like Jeff has he has like a studio in his I guess he built it for the most part in his backyard. And he has like kind of like this jam room where it's just like kind of like a almost like his like playroom as far as like production stuff goes. But he has like keyboards in there and like different instruments, a drum set. So like at night, for the most part, people would just pile in there like musicians and then they would just jam out and then like just have like these like hours on end jam sessions where like musicians would just kind of like come in and out and like play different things and whatnot. And then for me, just being like a DJ and producer and not really like a musician, I'm just kind of like observing a lot of this because I can't really like just go in and be like, oh, just let me learn this chord progression that I just learned like a couple of days ago, you know? But yeah, it was definitely like a fun time. And then towards the end of our stay, uh what Jeff does is he like puts everybody into groups. So we got kind of like grouped up with like different artists at Playlist, and then we would have to get source material and then create a song using source material. So they gave us like a folder of just like these songs that were presented to us, and then we would have to kind of like take samples from those songs and then make a new song out of it pretty much. And then we had like 24 hours to complete the song. So I got paired up with um, Paul Grant, which I actually flew in to Playlist with, and we kind of hit it off. We also got grouped up with Pasta News from De La Soul, of
Oh,
all
wow.
people. Yeah. So he was
What?
part of our group as well. And with a DJ and another singer, and then me. Like our groups got announced like 11 p.m. at night at this one of the last nights, 11 p.m. And then we had to work from like midnight till like the next day to like like make a song and finish it and submit it and everything. So we were we were like just some of us were just like completely like tired, but we had to book studio time because there was no other like places where you can record. So we were recording in the studio at like I don't know 3 a.m. and then having to try to complete a song. First we had to like produce the song, and that took like maybe an hour or so. Then we had to go like record the vocals for the song, booked it at like 3 a.m. And then since there was like limited studio time, we had to book it again the next or later on that day. So a few of us only slept for like 2 hours or something like that. And then just to complete a song. So it wasn't easy. It wasn't an easy time at Playlist, but it was definitely like an experience.
Yeah, wow, that's a pretty intense kind of working environment. Just to do the starting at midnight to have that 24-hour thing. That's wild.
I do have the song, but we submitted it to Jeff, and I don't know what his plans are for it, but it came out okay. There's some other groups came out with some really dope songs. There was just one group, I forgot who was in that group, but like I think Kalen Ellis was in part of that group or whatever, and some other people. I think Black Thought rapped on it. Yeah, that was another thing. They're like these random like artists would just kind of pop in and just kind of talk. Like Black Thought was there. Jay Farrell from like SNL was there. And then like Ryan Leslie gave a talk, and I think was it Styles P was there, and then yeah, and then like a handful of like just other artists just came in.
I mean, it sounds like it's kind of like this experience to really like reconnect you and re-energize kind of your like artistic and creative spirit. Is there anything that like kind of came up for you or that you did feel like kind of re-energized by after going through that?
Yeah, for sure. Like when I came home after that, I feel like I just kind of banged out like a bunch of songs because you know, everybody was just kind of motivating each other for the most part. And then you would see like other people just play their own music. Like there was times at night where like in one of Jeff's studios, it would just like a listening party, you know, like and people would just play their own music and people would just like just listen to it or just vibe out to it. And a lot of those other producers were just like making incredible music. So that was kind of like a real motivator for me to kind of step up my game a little bit.
Did you pick up anything from working with people with different kind of styles and backgrounds in that group you were put in?
I think with me, like I'm pretty good at like if there's a deadline, I'm pretty good about like working well with other people and working to, you know, to finish something. Well, since I did most of the like the the arranging the actual song, like the instrumental. And then I worked with Paul Grant. He plays like the keys and like the guitar and the bass and everything like that. He had a really good input. I'm really good at about like accepting other people's input on like songs like that because I already know that I'm not like a composer or like a musician or anything. So like having other people's input on like a group song is always good because sometimes like I feel like I need other people's ears to make it sound like more interesting for the most part. Like I said, like when I do previously, like I have that formula in my head already of how to like kind of like arrange something. So when I hear other people like say, "Oh, we should try this," or you know, we should add this or do this, I'd be like, yeah, I'm all ears for stuff like that.
So it's like if there's something that you experience there or that you feel like exists there that you wish you could bring out and spread more to the rest of us, what would that be?
I don't know. I would have to say just like the confidence that other artists have is just so different from from me. You know, like and they have every right to be confident because they're just incredibly talented people. But like I was saying, when we're doing those listening little parties or whatever it was, those listening things, I could tell the confidence that they had to play their own music and to really get people to kind of almost like bob their head to the stuff that they were playing was kind of like a really eye opener for me. You know, like just being able to love, I guess, your own stuff and present it to people, regardless of what their reactions would be. As long as I feel like as long as they loved it, for the most part, most people around in those listening things loved it as well.
Wow, that's a really cool little insight, man. I did not expect that. That's a really cool. Love what you do. So, man, with that, I have these kind of like more, you know, feel free to be as short or long-winded as you want. Which DAW do you use?
I use Ableton Live.
3 favorite albums.
I would have to say Reflection, Eternal, Train of Thought. These are like albums that I feel like I've just listened to like constantly throughout my life. Okay, so Reflection, Eternal, Train of Thought, probably Tribe Called Quest, Midnight Marauders, and then probably, I don't know.
Dude, but yeah, wow, Train of Thought is that you're the first person to bring that one up, but that's a very special album for me also, man. There's so many bangers on that.
Yeah.
Plugins you love and what you use them for.
I would have to say these are plugins that I use all the time because I like them. Arcade by Output is kind of like a cheat code for music or producers. It's just like it's basically just a bunch of like samples for the most part. But you can kind of like tune those samples to your own production, which is great. And I use that a lot for like a lot of the vocal the vocal stuff that you hear on my tracks. Um, and then I probably use Native Instruments Contact, a lot of their instruments, like like I was saying, like the Scarby bass and like the piano and some of the synths on there. I don't know if that really constitutes as a plugin because it's just a bunch of instruments, but I use that one a lot. And then probably RC20 for sound. Getting that kind of, I don't use it heavily for the lo-fi stuff, but just for like tape dropouts and like kind of spatial, kind of making your stuff sound a little bit wider, but also it distorts it a little bit in a good way. I think those are plugins that I use a lot.
Something you bought for music and never used.
I have two recently. So um, I have I have this nucleus right here, this SSL nucleus that I was looking to replace, and I bought the Behringer X Touch to kind of replace that, but I found myself not using it at all and just sticking with the nucleus. So that's one thing. And another thing is this, which is the Launch Control XL. I thought I would like this.
Yeah.
It's basically it helps with like DAW control and everything like that. But I found something else that I might like a little bit more than that. So I haven't been using that since I I opened it up, and it's fairly new. It's only like maybe a few weeks old.
Wait, so yeah, selfishly, I want to ask because I was thinking about. So I have an APC 40. I was thinking about getting something like just because, basically, just because like I was like that's smaller, and really what I love about the APC is like the faders. You know what I mean? Like so
Yeah.
being able to like throw faders if you're doing something live. But yeah, so why don't you like that? I thought that would be a really cool controller.
So I mainly got it for kind of like the rotary knobs, because what I wanted to mainly use it for is to have like more of a tactile control over like plugins. And since this one does have a screen and it kind of tells you what you're adjusting, it's good. It's okay, but kind of navigating through it, I just kind of don't like. And they're not touch sensitive faders, so like you don't really know what you're adjusting until you actually turn the knob. So I'm looking to kind of replace that with this, I forgot the model number, but it's by Melbourne Instruments, and it's kind of like this small kind of similar thing. It's just like these motorized rotary encoders, and it was specifically made for Ableton, so you can control like native Ableton plugins as well as third-party plugins. So I might trade in like those two things that I mentioned and get that one thing.
Oh well, that sounds. I've never heard of Melbourne Instruments. That sounds really cool. We'll link that for everybody too, so you can check it out.
Yeah, Melbourne Instruments, they actually they make these analog synths with the same motorized rotary controllers on their synths. So like when you bang through presets, the knobs automatically adjust for you. Like it's kind of crazy.
That sounds super fun, and also not inexpensive.
Yeah,
One habit that sabotages your creativity.
the internet, I think. It's hard to sit down and have access to like YouTube and like movie sites when you're on the computer. Sometimes I'll go into YouTube and it'll start with me just watching people making music or just playing stuff, and that'll kind of motivate me. But then it'll kind of our side track into something else, and then next thing you know, I'm not making anything, and that's kind of a little bit bad as far as like creatively, just even just social media. I think being on your phone, you'll like I was saying, like my Explorer sometimes it's just like really stupid things, and to the point where I'm just like, am I even like, am I even on social media for like a purpose, or am I just on here for just like entertainment? It's terrible.
I mean, how do you think about social media actually? Because you're not somebody who's like super active, but when you do, you post these like really substantial videos of you like making an entire track.
Like I don't take my YouTube channel too seriously, or even like Instagram or anything like that. I think for the most part, most people want to see that stuff, like me making a song or me presenting a song in the studio. I mean, that's what I want to see from some of the artists that I follow and stuff like that. That's why I feel like sometimes it's a little bit, it kind of sucks when I follow somebody on Instagram that's like a music producer or, a musician or whatever. And it's just like a bunch of stuff that isn't music related, just like a bunch of headshots of them. And I'm like, oh, like it's not really why I wanted to follow you, but whatever. But I feel like it's also good, growing up as a young producer, we didn't have access to like Pete Rock in the studio all the time or like, DJ Premier in the studio. So when we get those like little snippets or even glimpses of them like actually making stuff, we really kind of just keep watching those over and over and over because, we don't really get that. And that's kind of like how I wanted to treat my social media is like having that insight into, like me making music because I feel like that's what most of my followers are following me for and having that insight of not just my creative process, but like, studio gear and what I think about it and everything.
How do you think about sharing that process and the idea that you're maybe giving away secrets or the sauce or that people are going to look at it and be like, oh, you're doing this wrong or etc.
I take advice and criticism pretty well. Like if somebody is kind of saying I should do things this way or whatever, like, of course I'm going to listen to that. Just going on there and saying that you suck isn't very like constructive. But yeah, I also didn't want like, of course I'm not a teacher or anything like that, but I didn't want to like be a gatekeeper to like certain things because, like that's what I'm saying. Like I didn't have any of that stuff growing up as a young artist or a young producer of having an insight of to what my favorite producers were trying to do. And like I also don't want my music to live and die on a hard drive, like I try to put out my music as much as I can, even through these like small little snippets on Instagram or on YouTube or whatever it is. At least it exists somewhere where people have access to it and can listen to it or learn something from it. So yeah, I've never wanted to be like a gatekeeper, even with samples or something like that. Like I don't know, I'm just not one of those people. I just want people to kind of like learn from me, even if I'm making mistakes, like learns, whatever.
Something you wish more people understood about music and or production?
Honestly, I don't know. I don't know how to answer that question.
Movie that changed the way you think?
Oh, I don't even know about that. I don't want to say like Interstellar or anything like that. I don't know. I don't know. Like I'm trying to think of a movie that like kind of changed my perception about certain things, but I don't know. Terrible.
Advice that you found really useful?
I don't know. Probably just use like don't get so caught up in like gear for the most part. I mean, I know I have a lot of it, but but seriously, like if all of this was gone and I just had my computer, I can make almost like the same stuff that I've been making throughout the years. So like just use what you have access to and don't be so caught up on like gear acquisition and stuff like that. I mean, I'm super guilty of that, but to learn from my mistakes, I already told you I bought two things that I'm not using. So yeah, just find something that like you really enjoy using and just kind of stick with that and kind of learn the ins and outs of that. Also, learn how to service your own gear, especially if you buy like old or used gear. That's one thing I feel like studio people don't do. I mean, like young studio people, they don't take that into account. Is like your gear, just like your car, can break down, and to service that gear can be pretty pricey, just depending on what it is. So just learn the basics of like electronics and how capacitors work, because capacitors get blown all the time, and it's such a simple fix, and just like how to just troubleshoot your own stuff for the most part.
What fictional character do you see yourself in?
I'm kind of like Frodo in Lord of the Rings. No, I'm just joking. I don't know. Freakazoid, do you remember that character?
That does sound familiar. Wait,
he was a wacky superhero on the WB. It was like the same time as like Animaniacs came out. It was like this crazy dude.
why do you say that?
No, I'm just joking. I don't know. I don't know like if I see myself as Any like fictional character. I'm trying to think about my life, and I don't know.
It's too real.
Yeah, it's too real, man.
So the question that was left for you from a previous guest, how do you balance being a normal person in life, i.e. like your family, your relationships, etc., while being a musician?
Honestly, the balance isn't that difficult. It's not even that I've been doing it for so long that like making music for so long or being creative for so many years since, like I would have to say like a creative since I was like a teenager, that it's just a part of who I am. I definitely put family first, now that I have a son and everything like that. Or, my wife or family time first for the most part, because like all the music stuff, it'll be here, like that limited time that I do have, that hour or two that I do have every day to like make music at night or whatever it is, like if I feel really motivated to do something, I will. It's not really like a balancing act that I have to really stress over. It's not stressful. I think the family stuff is more stressful than the making the music stuff. You just kind of prioritize what you need to prioritize. You make time for the fun stuff for the most part, like, and music I feel falls into that fun stuff category. Or even and anything creative for the most part. Like, or even if you just want to play video games, just have fun or whatever it is. You you don't really prioritize that stuff. It's not as important, like just in general. Even music, like I think with my son, like raising especially like a 4-year old, it's this time is precious because when he gets older, he's not going to want to hang out with dad. So like I really do have to kind of like take that into account. Him being a young kid, like he wants to hang out with dad right now, or like with mom, or both of us, or he wants to go. We try to have him experience new things, like going to the zoo or going to Disneyland or whatever it is, because we want to create these memories, not just for him but for us. Like I've created like so many memories with music. You know what I'm saying? That it doesn't really take precedent right now for the most part. But yeah, like I was saying, it's just it's easy to balance the two because it's not really balancing. It's family. It's family now, and then the music stuff is just a part of that equation. You know what I'm saying?
For anybody who may not already know who you are, be following you, where do you like to send people? Are there any projects that you like to point to?
Yeah, I mean, you can follow me on like all things social media. I mean, I do have a YouTube channel that I post somewhat at least once a month when I have the time. And yeah, like you can check out old videos of there. I do a lot of talking in the older videos of how I kind of made certain songs. I think I talked about the Wave song on there as well. And you can follow me on social or Instagram, Freddie Joachim. I post pretty much the same things on there, just a more condensed kind of post. And then, yeah, you can find me on Spotify and Apple Music and all the other streaming platforms and whatnot. And you can, if you want to support me, you can go into my Bandcamp, freddiejoachim.com or freddiejoachim.bandcamp.com, and you can purchase albums there. And then, honestly, I don't have too much vinyl available through me. It's mainly through just like, Fat Beats or wherever, HHV. And then upcoming projects, I'm just slowly working on like my own project. It's just like another instrumental project. But it'll all be me. I feel like my previous projects were, like they were with labels and other people involved. And this new project is solely me doing everything, pretty much all the music, all the art, and all the logistics stuff. That's fun. But yeah, I don't know when it's going to come out, honestly. I keep telling people it'll be out soon, but to be honest, I don't know when. It'll be out when it's ready, hopefully somewhat soon.
Right on. Yeah. And, whenever it comes out, like you said, you do have a lot of music that already exists. So if you guys aren't already hip, go check it out. And if you already know it, go run it back. Is there anything else you'd like to say to the people or leave them with before we get out of here, Ben?
Not too much. I'll say this. I go on social media and I just see people just being crazy on social media. It's half of it is entertaining, to be honest, but the other half is pretty alarming. Like people who just can't really get their emotions in check, or, like kind of are a little bit too quick to react to things. And I'm just saying, like, you have to chill out. Like, don't be such a hothead. Like when people are approaching you, people get annoyed a little bit too easily nowadays, and I see it everywhere. I see it when I'm out at the grocery store, and I'm just, like, you don't want to be confrontational to these people because you don't know what they're capable of. But there's bigger things to cry about in this world, and there's bigger things to worry about and care about. So, just be nice to everybody. And, like, even if they're just having one bad day, you have to just kind of hope for the best that most people are, they'll learn from that and just be nicer, just learn to be nice to one another. And I don't want to see anybody that I know on social media having a crash out and dancing on top of a squad car or something, Like, I see, it's crazy. People are just losing their minds. And I know it's here, especially here in the US, it's kind of, we're living in a weird time. So, but yeah, don't be one of those weird people making headlines.
Oh man, you heard it here. Thank you so much for the generosity with your time. I got to give you your flowers. I mean, I've been a fan a long time. It really means a lot. And big fan of your music, and it's been a huge impact on my own path in production, especially when I was starting out. You have this calm commitment and, I don't know, just like really strong sense of humility and self-awareness. And I appreciate you being so candid and sharing all the different things that you've gone through from starting out all the way up to the playlist retreat. So thank you so much, man.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
All right, everybody, that concludes another episode of Producer Head. This has been Toru, and in a way, so are you. Peace. That's it for our conversation with Freddie Joachim. We dug into his early days DJing, his transition into production, the story behind Waves, and what success means after so many years in the game. This conversation with Freddie reminded me of the value of developing your craft in service of the music that you make and the artist that you are. I hope this conversation inspires you to get back in the studio and make your music because it matters to you. All right, see you in the next episode. This has been Toru, and in a way, so are you. Peace. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, share with a friend, and leave a rating and review wherever you're listening. This helps Producer Head find its place and its people. Without you, there is no Producer Head. Thanks again for tuning into Producer Head. Subscribe and join our community over at producerhead.substack.com so you never miss an episode. Substack subscribers receive exclusive access to the bi-weekly podium, the curation of my favorite discoveries on and offline over the past week. You'll also get access to Producer Head Bars, where I share the best of what's been shared with me to help you and other producers in our community grow. The podium and Producer Head Bars are designed to provide immediate inspiration and direct application in your creative process. So, subscribe at producerhead.substack.com to receive real inspiration and ideas you can use to elevate your own process today. If you care for the craft, get your exclusive access at producerhead.substack.com. This episode was co-produced, engineered, and edited by Matthew Diaz. Big thank you to him. From Producer Head, this is Toru, and in a way, so are you. Peace.